Hi, I'm Patrick Reagan. Welcome to TCP/IP, Part 2, TCP, UDP, and Ports. This video will continue the discussion on introducing the TCP/IP suite with emphasis on TCP and UDP protocols and discussion on ports and sockets. The Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, is a reliable, connection-oriented delivery service that breaks the data into manageable packets, wraps them with the information needed to route them to its destination, and then reassembling the pieces at the receiving end of the communication link. It establishes a virtual connection between the two hosts or computers so that they can send messages back and forth for a period of time. A virtual connection appears to be always connected, but in reality, it's made of many packets being sent back and forth independently. The most important information in the header includes the source and destination port numbers, a sequence number for the datagram, and a checksum. TCP uses acknowledgments to verify that the data is received by the other host. If an acknowledgment is not sent, the data is resent. You can think of the TCP protocol as similar to the United Parcel Services, where packages are tracked and must be signed when delivered. In addition, since the data packets can be delivered out of order, the TCP protocol must put the packets back in the correct order. TCP employs flow control and congestion control mechanisms to prevent the sender from overwhelming the receiver with data into a dynamically adjusted transmission rate based on network conditions such as packet loss and round trip time. It uses a sliding window approach to dynamically adjust the amount of data transmitted based on the receiver's buffer capacity. The TCP three-way handshake is a three-step process used to establish a reliable connection between a client and server before data transmission begins. This process ensures both parties are synchronized and ready to communicate. It establishes a reliable connection before data transfer, ensuring both parties are ready and aware of the connection status. It defines the parameters of the connection, such as the initial sequence numbers, which are crucial for reliable data transfers. It helps prevent man-in-the-middle attacks and ensures only authorized connections are established. Steps of the three-way handshake include SYN, or synchronize, where the client sends a SYN package to the server, initiating the connection request. This packet includes the client's initial sequence number, or ISN. The SYN ACK, which is short for synchronize acknowledge, is when the server responds with the SYN ACK packet acknowledging the client's SYN. This packet includes the server's initial sequence number and acknowledges the client's initial sequence number. ACK, short for acknowledge, is when the client sends an ACK package to the server acknowledging the server's SYN ACK. This packet confirms that connection is established. A TCP connection is released or closed using a four-step process known as the TCP four-way handshake, where both sides, client and server, agree to close the connection gracefully. This graceful termination ensures all data is delivered and no data is lost. A connection can also be closed abruptly using a reset packet, usually in error conditions or if a host is unreachable. If no data is transmitted over a TCP connection for a certain period, either the network infrastructure or the application itself may close the connection due to a timeout. The User Datagram Protocol, or UDP, does not use acknowledgments to ensure data delivery. The UDP header is relatively simple compared to TCP. The UDP is considered unreliable best effort delivery. UDP does not use handshaking. Since it's considered unreliable, UDP is used for protocols that transmit small amounts of data at one time or for broadcast where packets are sent to everyone. Note, unreliable doesn't mean that the packet will not get delivered. It's just that there's no guarantee or check to make sure that they get to their destination. You can think of the UDP protocol as similar to the United States Postal Service, where it handles millions of mail items every day, which most by far get delivered, but there's not tracking of each item and no check to see if any item got delivered. UDP is suitable for applications that prioritize speed and efficiency over reliability. Remember, TCP is connection-oriented, which has a formal connection set up and close. It ensures reliable delivery because of the use of acknowledgments. It has overhead because of the use of acknowledgements, making it slower than UDP. Connection-oriented protocols include HTTPS and SSH. UDP is connectionless. It has no error recovery, no reordering of data, or no flow control. It is quicker than TCP. Connectionless protocols include DHCP and trivial FTP. Every time a TCP/IP host communicates with another TCP/IP host, it will use the IP address and port number to identify the host and service or program running on the host. This enables multiple services to run simultaneously on the same computer and receive data intended just for them. A TCP/IP port number is a logical connection by client programs to specify a particular server program running on a computer on the network defined at the transport layer. The source port number identifies the network application or service that sent the data, and the destination port number identifies the application that receives the data. Port numbers are from 0 to 65,536. There are two types of ports, TCP and UDP, that are based on their respective protocols. Today, the very existence of ports and their numbers is typically transparent to the users of the network, as many ports are standardized. The Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, or IANA, manages port numbers from 0 to 65,535. Well-known ports are port numbers from 0 to 1023 that are used by common services like HTTP that uses port 80, HTTPS that uses port 443, and DNS that uses port 53. Registered ports are in the range of 1024 to 49,151, are used by applications that are less common but need specific ports to work. These ports can be registered to prevent duplication. Examples of applications that use registered ports include Remote Desktop Protocol that uses port 3389, Xbox Live and Games for Windows, which uses port 3074, and IBM Lotus Notes or Dominoes, which uses port 1352. Dynamic or informal ports are ports in the range of 49,152 to 65,535 are assigned temporarily to applications when they need to establish a connection. These ports are not assigned, controlled, or registered. When you connect to a web server to open a web page, you send a request to port 80 and/or port 443. When it gets to the server, the port 80 and 443 indicate the web services running on the server. When the web server responds, we'll assign a dynamic port to the requesting computer. Each requester will have its own port so it can keep track of multiple requesters. This allows the service and network application to communicate simultaneously with multiple clients. A socket is a virtual endpoint of a two-way communication link that acts as a communication channel between two applications on different devices, allowing them to exchange data over a network. It's a logical address that combines an IP address and a port number to uniquely identify a specific application on the host, enabling data transfer between applications on different computers. Sockets facilitate two-way communications between applications by establishing a connection through which data can be sent and received. Sockets can utilize different network protocols like TCP for reliable connection-oriented communications, or UDP for less reliable connectionless communication. TCP port 53 and UDP port 53 assigned to the same IP addresses are two separate sockets. A listening port refers to a specific port number on the computer that is actively waiting for incoming connections. It's like a door that's open and ready to receive incoming requests, but no connection has been established yet. When a processor server listens on a port, it means that it's ready to receive data and requests directed to that port. A web server might listen on port 80, HTTP, or port 443, HTTPS, which means it's ready to receive web requests from clients. Running the netstat command and Windows Resource Manager will show you the sockets and listening ports. A web page is a hypertext document on the web that is delivered by a web server to the user using a web browser. The web pages are delivered via the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP. HTTP or HTTPS creates connections via TCP. HTTP, which uses port 80, has content sent in clear or non-encrypted text, while HTTPS, which uses port 443, has content sent as encrypted content via secure sockets layer or transport layer security. Initial encryption is done using keys stored in a digital certificate. Today, many websites will redirect HTTP connections to HTTPS to provide better security and privacy. As mentioned in the previous slide, by default, when you visit a website with HTTP, it will use port 80, and when you visit a website with HTTPS, it will use port 443. Websites may offer multiple services beyond just HTTP. Port 8080 is often used for alternate HTTP traffic or development environments. Port 8443 is a common alternative for HTTPS in some applications. Developers might host a dev version of a site on a different port, such as port 3000 or 8081, to avoid conflicts with the main production server. A single server might host multiple applications, each running on a different port. Services may be restricted by port, for example, only exposing certain services to internal networks on custom ports. It also helps in setting firewall rules to tightly control access. When you access a website with different port, you just end the DNS name with :port number. Of course, it will default to 80 and 443 to the HTTP and HTTPS sites respectively without you specifying the port number. You can only have one application or service that owns a socket on a system, and it will be the listener for that application or service as defined by the port number. For example, if you have a web server for example.com, which uses both port 80 and 443, you can load Apache, the most common web software, or Microsoft IIS, but not both utilizing port 80 and 443 with the same names. However, you could load both software as long as they each use different ports. For example, you could have www.example.com using port 443 assigned to Apache, or you can use www.example.com using port 8080, which is assigned to IIS. Domain Name System, or DNS, is used to resolve names to IP addresses. When you type in a URL in a browser or you try to connect to a server or computer, DNS will resolve the name of the server or computer to an IP address. DNS uses port 53. Early DNS used UDP, but more recent versions were upgraded with reliability, security, and privacy, which uses TCP. Here are some common protocols and their port numbers. This will be discussed in more detail in the next two videos where we discuss popular TCP/IP protocols. If you intend to take the Network Plus or Security Plus exam, you should have already started making flashcards, and you should start studying them when you have a chance. Flashcards are an awesome tool to help you remember things. The protocols and the ports are just screaming for the use of flashcards. You can see the DNS at port 53, HTTP at port 80, and HTTPS at port 443. And here are some more protocols and their ports. If you need to figure out what port a protocol uses, you can use any search engine such as Google or Bing, or AI engines such as ChatGPT or Copilot. A good list of TCP and UDP port numbers can be found at the sites shown on the screen. Question: in the TCP/IP protocol suite, what is a reliable connection-oriented delivery service that uses acknowledgments to verify packets are delivered? Answer: TCP. Question: which is faster, UDP or TCP? Answer: UDP. Question: when a TCP/IP host communicates with the server, how is the service or program identified on the server? Answer: by port number. Question: what does an IP address and a port number together define? Answer: a socket. Question: what do you call ports 0 through 1023? Answer: well-known ports. Question: what ports are temporary ports? Answer: dynamic ports. Question: what port does the following network services use? HTTP uses port 80, HTTPS uses port 443, and DNS uses port 53. For more information, visit these sites. The Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, is a reliable, connection-oriented delivery service that uses acknowledgments to verify that the data was received by the other host. The TCP three-way handshake is a three-step process used to establish a reliable connection between a client and a server before data transmission begins. The User Datagram Protocol, or UDP, does not use acknowledgments to ensure data delivery. Every time a TCP/IP host communicates with another TCP/IP host, it will use the IP address and port number to identify the host and service or program running on the host. A socket is the IP address and its port number. Thank you for watching this video. The next video will be TCP/IP Part 2, Ports, Protocols, and Services Part A. If you have not already, subscribe to the Pat Has Your Back channel. Thank you.